First of all, I would like to ask the following thing. Unfortunately, I lost my glasses, and I'm an old woman now, and I cannot read without glasses. Is there anybody in the audience who has a presbyopia glasses about 2 degrees? Maybe can help me, because I found something.
Let's see if it works.
Wonderful, thank you. So, thank you so much. Can I ask you, do you have the slides? Do you have the slides I sent? No.
It's the first time I hear about these slides.
I sent it last week.
Okay.
Never mind. Okay, never mind. Actually, I had been asked to deliver a speech on the wall and the next day of the wall, and then Mark asked me to speak in the Economic Forum, trying to find the links in this discussion between the walls and the economic situation in the world and what kind of walls there are now. So I will change a bit the structure of my speech. The title was Wir sind das Volk, we are the people. This was the slogan heard in October 9 in 1989 from thousands of people who marched in the city of Leipzig. Wir sind das Volk, this was the slogan in many German cities during this period, and not only in German cities. We know that in order to have this famous day of the 9th of November of the Berlin Wall, there were so many events. There were events in Poland with solidarity, in Hungary, where symbolically they wired the borders, the Baltic chain in the north. There are many events in Hungarian with big rallies. In October, there was this big 70,000 people demonstration in Leipzig. Then it was in East Germany, in many cities. In November, there was the fall of the Berlin Wall. And then we know very well what happened in Romania and Bulgaria. And then the unification of Germany in 1999. What it is important to see in a few words is that the fall of the Berlin Wall was the peak, and at the same time the real and symbolic victory of the people in a search of personal freedom and democracy. The communist regime collapsed under the weight of economic problems and political deadlock. This collapse, as it is always the case, happened since history when people united and when people with soul and passion decide to move forward and scan them all. There are always walls in history with different meaning and different purpose. From ancient Greeks and the walls, the famous walls of the cities of Athens and Thiva and other famous ancient Greek cities, to the Ottoman period, we have walls who at that time protected people or created lines between the people within and outside the borders. There are still walls in the world. There are barriers that we can find, of course, in Middle East, in North Africa, in Mexico, in Northern Ireland, in Korea. In our neighborhood, we can see the division of Cyprus, of the city of Nicosia, the wall in Jerusalem. The fall of the Berlin Wall, under the wrath of the people, the images of young people who destroyed it brick to brick, reveals the weakness of a regime, no matter how hard it is to deprive for a long period the personal freedom and the control people's lives. And this is the optimistic message that the walls cannot stay there forever. The importance of the Berlin fall, of course, some bricks are still there. The fall of the Berlin Wall was of an enormous significance for the Germans. We know very well that Germany became a united state, one of the bigger one in Europe, and one of the stronger countries in the world. It was very important for Europe, and I think it is important to focus that what happened behind the walls and what happened in the Soviet Union's dissolution led to the enlargement of the European Union, a political entity unique in the human history, who today has a number of 20 member states. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of the Iron Curtain, Europe was reborn. Europe doubled its population, became one of the three bigger powers in the world, and became a commercial power. Let us see some specific and very interesting numbers. The EU covers over 4 million square kilometers and had 500 million people. It is the world's third largest population after China and India. The EU's economy, measured in terms of the goods and services it produced, in terms of GDP, it was almost 13 million in 2012, and it became 13 million in 2013, although there was such a big crisis. The current account surplus of the EU 28 was 68 millions in 2012 and 150 millions in 2013. Again, I give this change because it happened during the crisis. With just 7% of the world's population, the EU's trade with the rest of the world accounts for around 20% of global exports and imports. Around 2/3 of EU countries' total trade is done with other European countries. Trade has been hit by the global recession, but the EU remains the world's largest player, accounting for 16.4% of global imports in 2011. There are many other interesting figures. If I had the PowerPoint, it would be easy because you could see the numbers, but I don't want to read the tables and numbers. I understand it is very difficult. What the point is that after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the symbolic fall of the Berlin Wall, and the changes in the Soviet Union, we can see the emerging of a new power, a new economic power. And at that time, in '89, there were so many dreams and perspectives. We'll see if it is true or not according to people's dream. The fall of the Berlin Wall was important for the world as a whole. We had the transition from the Cold War bipolar system to a system with a single global power, the United States of America, whose reign is only now beginning to be questioned. The major changes that succeeded 1989 are dramatically reflected in most countries' political landscape across the world. We see communist parties in all continents which have lost their prestige, the support, and at the same time ideological and revolutionary movements which have lost their vision for equity and socialism as the communism was promising at that time. The globalization, the free economy, the uncontrolled strengthening of the financial markets with no rival, with no meaningful political controversy, had very different consequences from what 1989's European revolutions imagined for the people of Europe, for the people of Russia, and the peoples of the world. 20 years after the new walls, the political governance of the planet has been transferred to the loose G20 summits and to the fragmented actions of the aged international institution of the Bretton Woods. We know very well that there is not such a thing, such a real thing as a global governance. There are such meetings, there are some very loose decisions, they cannot implement them. The effective governance belongs to the notorious markets that drive economies and governments. What the planet really needs today is cooperation. Otherwise, an era of protectionism will revive, similar to the 1930s. Free market has been deformed to such point that is in danger of collapsing, while trade imbalances constitute the root of all current debt crises that damage the developed economies. Protectionism was a form of a wall for many decades. It was a wall raised by the strong countries with big production in order to protect their own business and their own employees towards the small and economically weak countries that were based on the agricultural production, but they were unable to cooperate among them. The collapse of the Soviet Union, the changes in the policies of China, lowered this kind of walls, the protectionism walls, but empowering in many cases the national productions and economic powers. During the last 20 years, GDP has increased in poor countries, with, on the other hand, rich countries have witnessed an immense increase of social inequalities with the societies and among the countries or among the continents. So, on the one side, we can see that poor countries are in a better position as a whole, but the inside inequalities are really immense. There is an excellent report, and I suggest it to you. It is the Oxford Martin report, who has been produced 1 year ago, and the main idea is the research and the results of the report is about how the world will be in 30 years. And there we can see very interesting ideas that in next years we'll have a lot of changes concerning consumption, production, and the middle class, but these big changes will take place in Asia and in Africa. And about 2.5 billion people will join the middle class, but not in Europe or in the United States. So there is a change. And we are now in front of how we are going to deal with this change. Because inequalities brought by free trade and the economic crisis lead governments to national protectionism, a method historically proven to be a factor of an internal explosions and wars. We were in the 30s, we have the protectionism walls. Then there was a period of free trade. Now the free trade and the economy of the markets, the strength of the markets, have derailed the economies because of the free trade. And now there is again the fear of protectionism, and we can see it in many countries. We can see it even in European countries, and it can be extremely dangerous even for walls. We very well know that behind always the reasons of the walls are economical. I would like to focus on this issue of inequalities and the new wall of inequalities in the European Union. In order to return to the European Union, we could say that 25 years later, after the events, and after a devastating economic crisis, there is still a wall in Europe, and this wall is the wall of inequalities. The huge inequalities that have been formed in Europe and that have been expanded due to the crisis revealed evidence that have been presented by Eurostat. The numbers are being terrifying. According to the evidence, the inhabitants of Luxembourg are enjoying a GDP 2.5 times higher than the EU 28 average. And I'm afraid that what we have read the last days about what happened with the tax evasion in Luxembourg is not a very optimistic message. The lucky list is being completed by Austria, the Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, and Belgium. For every inhabitant of these countries, GDP is 20% or 30% higher than the average. Among Europe's poorest are included Bulgaria, 44% of the average, Romania, 50%, Croatia, 62%. Just to give you an idea about Greece, which is my home country, because of the crisis, we can see a slump in ranking only in a few years. In 2010, the Greek GDP was 80% of the European one, of the average. 1 year later, in 1 year, it went to 75%. And now, of course, it is much less, since in Greece there is a loss of 25% of GDP in 4 years. These imaginary walls erected within urban centers and between regions and between countries, and different in nature and tech, and of course it is a different wall than the one from the Berlin Wall, but they are also hinder the course of a united Europe. The walls of inequality exclude young people and women from the labor market, marginalize the weak and those that have nothing, create tensions, and dissolve political systems. We can see the last days in Spain, which is a big country with a big production and a very big economy, that in the polls, first, yes.
Because of the glasses, but
Yes, you give me 2 minutes because of the glasses, but I'm okay, I'm finishing. So we can see what I was telling was the impact of these inequalities to the political systems and how they can really dissolve them. In Spain now we can see that first in polls it is a party, not a party, it is a movement, and it is a threat, a kind of threat for the political system, because really nobody can understand where this movement is placed. It is right, it is right and left, it is in the middle, no, it is something which is against, so it is a kind of protest, and we can see it everywhere, to protest and to have a message of anti, not a message of proposals. The results we had in the elections, in the European elections, were very clear. I mean, this was what we saw everywhere. And we can say that the European Union succeeded in providing the enslaved of the Berlin Wall with an area of democracy, tolerance, and respect of human rights, which are the main characteristics of Europe for centuries. However, this is not enough, as people need work and a decent life, as much as they need their freedom. And here is my last point. It is not just enough to be free and have democracy. It is not just enough to have a decent life. You need both. This is what a human being needs. Wir sind das Volk. Again, this slogan can be found across Europe. I'll give you 2 very recent examples, just to explain, to give you examples of what I mean. In February 2013, millions of protesters in 20 Bulgarian cities went to the streets because they couldn't withstand the increases in electricity bills. They couldn't no longer keep themselves warm. They couldn't even cook. It was a huge increase in the prices of electricity. The government announced a reduction, but at the same time resigned, and since then, Bulgaria has continuous elections. On the other side, a few weeks ago, we saw a large demonstration in Hungary. And it was after the decision of the Prime Minister Orban to tax internet. Angry protesters raised in the air their smartphones, and they protested because it was something against the freedom of expression, of communication. The message in both rallies was the same. Wir sind das Volk. We are the people. The people cannot accept any situation, any political situation that is not able to secure these two main things, democracy and freedom and decent life. And the EU, with the newly elected Parliament and Commission, stands before a new era. During this very difficult time, with Middle East aflame, and the war already started in borders of the European Union, the Union is facing a great challenge, tearing down the internal war of inequality without building its own protectionist walls. The stake is large and difficult, but the goal of freedom and equality is perhaps the greatest European idea. Thank you.